Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling someone really foundational. Maybe not the founder, but definitely the one who made Stoicism stick.
You mean Chrysippus of Soli?
Exactly. You hear that quote all the time, right? If Chrysippus had not existed, the Stoa would not have existed.
Yeah.
That's quite the statement.
It really is. And it sets the scene perfectly for what we need to do today. I mean, he wasn't just the third head of the school after Zeno and Cleanthes. He was, you could say, its chief architect, its intellectual rescuer.
Rescuer. How so? Weren't Zeno's ideas strong enough?
They were powerful, definitely, but they lacked a certain systematic rigor. Chrysippus came in and gave Stoicism what scholars now call that stronger and more intellectually defensible form. It needed that structure, that backbone, to survive the philosophical debates of the time. He basically drew up the blueprints.
Right, the blueprint for endurance. But here's the kicker, isn't it? The irony. All his own work. What was it, like 700 books?
Over 700 works, yeah. The sources say he often wrote 500 lines a day, just prolific.
And yet, they're basically gone.
Yep.
Vanished. They didn't make that leap from, papyrus scrolls to medieval books like so many others did.
It's a huge loss. So our goal today, for you listening, it isn't really a straightforward biography. We can't do that.
No, it's more like philosophical archaeology.
Kind of, yeah. An extraction.
Mm.
We're trying to piece together the framework he built, the underlying structure. You can see his fingerprints everywhere, really, in how they defined logic, how they understood emotions.
Even in the practical advice from Seneca or Epictetus later on.
Absolutely. The technical terms they use, the way they frame problems, a lot of that goes straight back to Chrysippus. So even though we rarely hear his exact words, we can trace his influence. It's this intellectual architecture, this sheer technical brilliance that let Stoicism grow from this, small Athenian school into a major force across the Roman world.
Okay, so let's dig into that structure. Because to really get Chrysippus, you have to see how he approached philosophy itself, right? Like building something, layer by layer.
Exactly. Ancient philosophy wasn't just about, pithy sayings. It was about building a whole coherent system, a worldview where everything connected. So the early Stoics, Zeno, Cleanthes, and especially Chrysippus, they organized philosophy very neatly into three parts: physics, logic, and ethics. And they had this great analogy to show how they all fit together.
The garden analogy, I like that one.
Yeah, it's very intuitive. So ethics is the fruit. That's the goal, right? The good life, happiness, virtue. That's what you're trying to cultivate.
Okay, it makes sense. The end product.
But you can't get the fruit without, the rest of the garden. Logic, they said, is like the fence around it. It protects your thinking, keeps it sound, makes sure your methods are reliable. It guards the integrity of the whole process.
Protects it from bad reasoning, I guess.
Exactly. And physics. Physics is the soil itself. It's the ground, the substance, the underlying reality that makes growth even possible.
Okay, ethics is the fruit, logic is the fence. But why physics first? Why did Chrysippus insist that you had to start with the soil, with understanding the cosmos? Couldn't you just have good reasoning defense and aim for the fruit?
That's the crucial question, really. And Chrysippus's answer is what sets Stoicism apart. He was adamant. He said the only proper way to even begin talking about ethics, about good and bad, virtue, happiness, is, and this is a direct quote, from universal nature and the management of the universe.
Wow. Okay, so understanding the universe isn't just like an academic side project. It's step one for living ethically. You need the map of reality to know how to navigate it.
Precisely. And this is where we dive into some core Stoic ideas. When Chrysippus talks about nature, he means God, or logos, which is like universal reason, or pneuma.
Right, pneuma. Let's pause there. What exactly is that? Sounds a bit mystical.
Well, it's physical for them. Think of it as an intelligent, active principle, like a kind of rational, creative fire or breath that shapes passive matter. It's the agent of divine reason, the logos, working within the world.
So God isn't separate, pulling strings from outside.
No, that's key. For the Stoics, the divine is immanent. It's in everything, identical with perfect rationality, organizing the whole show, like honey permeating a honeycomb, they said.
Okay, so the universe isn't just stuff happening. It's structured, rational, because this pneuma, this logos, runs through it.
Exactly. The universe is a coherent, well-managed whole. And that grounds ethics in what's called teleology, the idea that the world and our own nature within it has a purpose, a rational direction.
Which means our moral rules aren't just made up. They're not just cultural habits.
Correct. They're embedded in the very structure of reality. Our job, our ethical task, is to understand that structure and live in accordance with it. to align our own reason with the universal reason. The ultimate goal, Diogenes Laertius reports, is harmony between his own spirit and the will of the director of the universe.
That provides a pretty solid foundation, I guess. No wonder Chrysippus wanted that certainty.
Absolutely. He wanted a system that couldn't be easily shaken.
But you mentioned there's some debate about this. That later Stoics, the Romans like Seneca and Epictetus we read more often, they maybe didn't emphasize the physics quite as much.
Yeah, that's an important point scholars discuss. While Chrysippus clearly anchors ethics and cosmology, some argue that, in practice, this cosmic groundwork doesn't always seem essential for every specific ethical point later writers make. The connection isn't always, quote, clear or helpful for their more practical aims.
So maybe if you're Epictetus teaching someone how to deal with, say, exile or pain right now, you might skip the lecture on pneuma and jump straight to what's in their control.
It seems that way sometimes. The focus shifts a bit towards psychological therapy, therapia, healing the soul's judgments. Maybe the complex physics was just assumed knowledge by then, or maybe the immediate need for practical guidance in Rome pushed it slightly into the background.
But it's still underlying everything.
Oh, definitely. Even Epictetus insists you need to understand your place in the cosmos, that God is the author of your nature. The blueprint is still Chrysippus's, even if later folks focused on, let's say, renovating the upper floors more often than inspecting the foundations.
Okay, so physics is the soil, the cosmic foundation.
Yeah.
Logic, then, is the fence, the method ensuring everything built on that foundation is solid and straight.
Yeah.
And Chrysippus was the guy for logic, wasn't he? The dialectician.
He really was. And we need to be clear, logic for the Stoics was a massive field, much broader than just formal syllogisms. It covered formal reasoning, yes, but also epistemology, the theory of knowledge, basically. How do we know things?
Okay.
It also included rhetoric, how to express ideas clearly and persuasively, and even psychology, looking at how the mind processes information, forms beliefs, and crucially, how it messes up. The ancient Stoics were genuine pioneers in formal logic, stuff that looks a lot like modern propositional logic.
Well, okay, give us an example of his, laser-focused precision. That Chryssippian criterion for validity sounds pretty intense.
It is quite technical, but the core idea is about achieving certainty. Basically, Chrysippus said an argument is valid if, and this is the key bit, the contradictory of the conclusion is logically incompatible with the premises all taken together.
Okay, break that down a bit. Incompatible. Contradictory.
Right. Think of it like this. If you have an argument, say, if P, then QP is true, therefore Q must be true. For that to be valid, according to Chrysippus, it must be absolutely impossible for the premises, if P, then Q, and P, to be true, and for the conclusion Q to be false at the same time.
So if it's daylight P, then the sun is above the horizon Q. It's daylight P, therefore the sun is above the horizon Q. The conclusion sun is up can't be false if the premises if daylight then sun is up and it is daylight are true.
Exactly. The opposite of the conclusion, the sun is not above the horizon, is totally incompatible with the premises, it being daylight, and the rule linking daylight to the sun's position. This rigorous standard, this demand for absolute logical necessity, gave the whole Stoic system its intellectual power. He wasn't interested in probably true, he wanted airtight.
Right. That makes sense. He's building for certainty. And this connects directly to how we gain knowledge, right? The idea of assent. This seems like where logic meets everyday life.
Absolutely. This is where the fence protects the garden within your own mind. It starts with an impression of fantasia. That's just what appears to you, the raw data from your senses or thoughts. It looks like rain. That person seems angry.
Just the appearance.
Just the appearance. The crucial step, the moment of judgment, is assent, synkatathesis. That's you saying, yes, that impression is true. And the Stoic sage, the ideal wise person, has, quote, infallible control over his assent.
Infallible control
meaning they only give that yes, that assent to impressions they are absolutely certain are true. These are called cataleptic impressions, cognitive impressions. They're so clear, so distinct, they practically grab hold of the reality they represent and couldn't possibly be false. They have a kind of self-validating clarity.
So the wise person isn't like shutting down their senses. They're just being incredibly careful about which appearances they believe.
Precisely. They experience everything, but they withhold judgment. They practice apoke, suspension of judgment, unless they have that cataleptic, undeniable certainty. For everything else, unclear feelings, ambiguous situations, hearsay, they just don't commit.
And the rest of us,
yeah,
the non-sages, we mess this up constantly.
That's the Stoic diagnosis. We suffer from precipitancy, proptotia. We rush, we jump to conclusions, we assent too quickly to unclear impressions. He cut me off, he must have done it deliberately.
Right, the example from before. Jumping from impression to judgment without checking.
Exactly. And that rash assent to unclear or false impressions leads to doxa opinion, which for the Stoics isn't just any belief. It's a weak, uncertified, likely false belief. It's assent to the incognitive. This habit of erroneous assent, this self-deception, is basically the definition of ignorance and the root of our troubles.
Okay, I see the link. Faulty logic, or rather faulty application of assent, leads directly to mistaken beliefs and then presumably to negative emotions and bad action.
You got it. It all interconnects.
And this connects back to Socrates too, doesn't it? The whole idea of examining our terms, our concepts. Epictetus talks about this a lot.
He does, following Chrysippus's lead. Epictetus says, the beginning of education is the scrutiny of terms. The Stoics believed, like Socrates, that all our misery stems from misapplying our basic ideas, our preconceptions or prolepsies.
Preconceptions like
Like everyone has a basic innate idea of good, justice, fear. We all agree badness is harmful, for instance. That's the preconception. The problem arises when we try to apply that general concept to a specific situation without proper analysis.
so everyone agrees badness is bad. But we argue endlessly about what specific things count as bad. Is poverty bad? Is losing an election bad? Is feeling pain bad?
Exactly. We misapply the general term because we haven't scrutinized the specific case using reason. We assent precipitantly. Chrysippus's dialectic, his logical method, was designed to be the tool for that scrutiny. It exposes these unrecognized inconsistencies and involuntary ignorance, as one scholar puts it. It forces clarity.
Okay, so we've got the cosmic view from physics and the tools for certainty from logic, especially controlling assent. Now the big one, emotions. This feels like where Chrysippus really brings it all together. Arguing emotions aren't just feelings that happen to us.
Absolutely. This is probably his most famous and maybe controversial contribution. The core Stoic doctrine, really hammered home by Chrysippus, is that emotions, the disruptive ones they called pathety, aren't just passive feelings. They are volitional. They depend on our will. And crucially, they are specific kinds of judgments or assents.
Right. So when people think of Stoics as suppressing emotion, that's not quite it.
Not quite. It's more like correcting the judgment that constitutes the emotion. Most people think the emotion is the physical feeling, the heart pounding, the knot in the stomach, the tears welling up.
Yeah, that seems intuitive.
But Chrysippus argued that's just the psychophysical side effect. The real emotion is the judgment itself. Fear isn't the trembling, it's the judgment, something terrible is coming and it's truly bad for me. Grief isn't the crying, it's the judgment. Something truly bad has happened and my life is diminished.
So you change the judgment, you change the emotion.
That's the principle. The feeling might linger for a bit, like the ripples after a stone is thrown in water, but the source of the disturbance is the faulty assent. Assenting to the impressions that typically lead to anger, for instance, is dangerous because once that judgment, I have been wronged and revenge is appropriate, takes hold, the passion gains momentum. Seneca compared it to a swelling, a disease.
Right, you mentioned that. Like a fever you can't just instantly reason away.
Exactly. Once you've made that faulty assent, the resulting emotional state is characterized by this irrational swelling or contraction of the soul, and it resists immediate rational control. You kind of have to ride it out while working on not making the same mistake next time. That's why controlling the initial assent is so vital.
Okay, so to help people manage this, Chrysippus didn't just say control your judgments. He actually classified these problematic emotions, right? Like a doctor diagnosing illnesses.
Precisely. He identified 4 main types of these undesirable emotions, the pathy. These are all considered unreasoning movements of the soul because they involve assenting to false or unclear propositions about good and evil.
What are the 4?
Okay, first you have distress or sorrow, lupi. This is defined as a contraction of the mind contrary to reason. It's your response when you judge that something bad is happening right now. Think grief, anguish over loss.
Okay, present evil.
Second, fear, phobos. This is a withdrawing or shrinking that's apart from reason. It's the response to judging that something bad is about to happen. Perspective evil.
Future evil, got it.
Third, desire, epithemia. This is a reaching or striving that's too intense, opposed to reason. It's the response to judging that something good, something you lack is in the future and you need it. Craving, intense longing.
Perspective good.
And fourth, excessive gladness or pleasure, hedona. This isn't calm enjoyment. It's described as a hollow sort of uplift or an unreasoning elevation of mind. It's the response to judging that something good is present right now, but judging it as more important than it really is. Think irrational exuberance, giddy delight over trivial things.
Present good, judged wrongly.
Yeah.
Okay, so distress, fear, desire, excessive gladness, all based on faulty judgments about present or future goods and evils.
Exactly. And the goal isn't to feel nothing, but to replace these irrational pathia with their rational counterparts. The eupathei, literally, the good feelings.
Yeah, so there are positive Stoic emotions.
Yes, but they're different. They are described as quiet, consistent, rational states that align with correct judgments. There are three main ones corresponding to three of the pathia.
Okay, what are they?
First, corresponding to excessive gladness, hudona, you have joy, kara. This is a rational elevation based on the presence of true good, which for a Stoic is virtue or virtuous action. It's calm, stable appreciation.
Makes sense. Replacing giddy excitement with calm satisfaction in virtue.
Second, corresponding to desire, epithemia, there's wish, bolosis. This is a rational striving for a future good again, meaning moral good, like wishing for the wisdom to act well tomorrow or working towards justice. It's reasoned aspiration, not needy craving.
Okay. Rational desire for virtue.
Third, corresponding to fear, phobos. You have caution, eulabia. This is a rational avoidance or shrinking from future evil, but since the only true evil is vice, this means taking rational steps to avoid acting badly or developing bad character. It's prudence, not panic.
Rational avoidance of vice. Okay. Joy, wish, caution. Wait, what about distress, sorrow, Lupi? What's the good counterpart to that?
That's the really interesting part. There isn't one.
And no rational counterpart to sorrow. Why not?
This really highlights the radical nature of the Stoic ideal. Distress or sorrow, remember, is the judgment that a present evil has occurred. But for the perfected sage, the only true evil is vice, moral corruption. Since the sage, by definition, is virtuous, they cannot experience true present evil.
So things like poverty, pain, bereavement. Those aren't true evils, so there's no rational basis for the contraction of sorrow.
That's the challenging conclusion, yes. External events might be unwelcome, they might be dispreferred indifference, but they don't harm your core rational self, your virtue. Therefore, the sage experiences no grief, no sorrow in the sense of lupa. The mind has no reason to be contracted against reality if it understands reality correctly.
Wow, that is a very high bar. No grief at all.
It's the logical outcome of the system Chrysippus built. If virtue is the only good and vice the only evil, and virtue vice reside only in our judgments, then external events cannot be truly evil.
Okay. And he did just classify the emotions themselves, but also the underlying tendencies, right? The character flaws. You mentioned nosomata and proclivities.
Yes, this is him getting really clinical, really diagnostic about the soul. This is where that idea of the philosopher as a doctor comes in strongly, the school as a hospital. Chrysippus helped develop the technical language. Nosomata are the diseases of the mind. Think chronic conditions, ingrained character flaws like greed, philogyria, or ambition, philotemia. They're like deep-seated illnesses.
So not just a one-off bad feeling, but a chronic state.
Exactly. And then you have ahustomata, infirmities, which are related, and also proclivities. Iumtuxiae. Proclivities are tendencies or vulnerabilities towards specific passions. You might not be chronically angry, anosoma, but you might have a proclivity towards anger. A short fuse, basically. You're easily tipped into assenting to anger-inducing impressions.
Like a predisposition.
Precisely. So the philosopher doctor needs to diagnose, is this a full-blown disease or a specific vulnerability? The treatment might differ. It's about identifying the specific pattern of faulty assent.
And the cure is always more logic, more scrutiny.
Essentially, yes. It's the relentless application of reason to your own judgments. You have to catch the faulty assent, challenge the underlying belief, understand why it's irrational according to the nature of things, and consciously replace it with a correct, rational judgment, a cognitive impression. Chrysippus provided the systematic framework for doing exactly that.
Okay, so we've seen the cosmic view, physics, the method for certainty, logic, and the theory of emotions as judgments. How does this all cash out in terms of actually living? How does the structure lead to the good life?
Right, this brings us back to that core ethical idea which Chrysippus really cemented. Virtue is the only true good, vice the only true evil, everything else is indifferent.
Yes, and that word indifferent trips so many people up. It sounds like Stoics don't care about anything other than virtue, but Chrysippus' system gives it nuance. Health, wealth, reputation. These things aren't morally good or bad. They don't define your worth as a person, but they aren't worthless either.
They're preferred indifference, right? Exactly. They're preferable because they align with our nature. It's natural to prefer health to sickness, wealth to poverty. The actions we take to secure these natural advantages are called kathekanta appropriate actions, duties.
So I should try to be healthy, manage my finances, raise my kids, even though these things aren't the ultimate good. This seems like the central tension people find confusing.
It does seem like a tension, but Chrysippus resolves it by distinguishing between the goal of an action and the measure of its success. The natural goal might be, say, to heal a patient if you're a doctor. That's the preferred outcome.
Okay.
But the moral success, the thing that actually contributes to your virtue and happiness, isn't achieving that outcome,
Yeah.
because that might depend on external factors, luck, the patient's condition. The moral success lies entirely in the attempt, in the rational discrimination, the effort, the intention you put into performing your role virtuously.
Ah, okay. So the doctor's virtue isn't measured by whether the patient lives or dies, but by whether the doctor acted with skill, diligence, compassion, fulfilling their role rationally and well.
Precisely. If the doctor does everything right, with perfect reason and intent, they have succeeded morally, even if the patient unfortunately dies. If they act carelessly and the patient recovers by luck, they've failed morally. The virtue is purely in the quality of the volition, the choice, the assent behind the action.
That clears it up. And that must be why the later Stoics emphasized that reserve clause, doing things, with the understanding that the outcome isn't fully yours. I will sail tomorrow, fate permitting.
It's the direct, practical output of Chrysippus making virtue entirely internal, dependent only on our reason and assent. External outcomes are indifferent in the moral sense.
Okay, and this ethical framework, focusing on internal rationality, also leads outwards, doesn't it, towards community?
Yes, absolutely. The Stoic isn't just a rational being, they are fundamentally a social being. This is the doctrine of oikiosis. It's a bit hard to translate: appropriation, familiarization, the development of self-concern.
How does it work? We start caring about ourselves naturally.
Right, self-preservation is the starting point. But as our rationality develops, we recognize that our good is tied up with the good of others like us. Our concern naturally expands. Hierocles had that image of concentric circles.
Oh yeah, tell us about that.
You're at the center. The first circle is your immediate family, then relatives, then neighbors, fellow townspeople, fellow countrymen, and the final largest circle encompasses all of humanity.
And oikiosis is the process of drawing those outer circles closer, treating them more like the inner ones.
That's the idea. You come to see all humans as kin because we all share in the divine logos, that universal reason. We are all citizens of one state, the cosmopolis, the world city. This was a revolutionary idea, a foundation for universal ethics, natural law. It means you have duties not just to yourself or your family, but to everyone.
A duty of care for all humans because we share rationality.
Exactly. We're all parts of the same rational system governed by nature.
And Epictetus made this very concrete by talking about our specific social roles, didn't he?
He did. He emphasized that we occupy various roles: parent, child, citizen, friend, maybe magistrate or employee. These roles come with built-in duties, derived either from nature or from our specific circumstances. Living virtuously means fulfilling the responsibilities of those roles rationally and well. Your integrity lies in playing your assigned parts properly within the grand play directed by nature.
So all this complex system, the physics, the logic, the ethics, the social theory, it all seems to converge on that very practical Roman Stoic advice. Focus on what you control.
It really does. The dichotomy of control isn't just a handy life hack, it's the logical endpoint of the entire system Chrysippus architected. If virtue is the only good, and virtue resides only in our judgments and volitions, our assent, then the only things that truly matter for our fundamental well-being are precisely those internal states. Our attitudes, our assents, our desires, our opinions about what happens.
Everything else is external, indifferent. Material to work with, but not the source of good or evil itself.
Correct. External events are the raw material upon which we exercise our virtue or vice. Our mind's capacity to assent correctly is the only thing that is truly, unequivocally ours.
Which brings us back to Epictetus, the slave, making that incredibly powerful claim.
The classic line, "You can bind up my leg, but not even Zeus has the power to break my freedom of choice." That's not just rhetoric. It's a statement grounded in the entire Stoic system, refined by Chrysippus, asserting that the core of our being, our rational agency, our ability to assent virtuously, is inviolable, regardless of external circumstances.
He really did provide the foundations for that kind of resilience. It wasn't just about telling people to be tough. It was about showing them why, logically, their core self couldn't be harmed by externals.
That's his legacy. He turned Stoicism from maybe a set of insightful principles into a rigorous, coherent, intellectually formidable system for living. Hashtag tag outro. So just to wrap up Chrysippus's massive contribution, he brought the system. He provided that logical rigor that with his cognitive theory of emotions. He showed Stoicism wasn't just, helpful advice, but a complete worldview. It defined reality through physics, it diagnosed human error with incredible precision through logic and psychology, and it prescribed a very specific, rational path to flourishing through ethics.
Yeah, he demonstrated that the path to inner peace wasn't about wishful thinking, but about the hard work of applying reason consistently, grounded in how the universe actually is.
Understanding that structure, how the logic supports the physics, and how both inform the way we handle our judgments about emotions and events, that's really the key for you listening to grasping why Stoicism was and still is so powerful. It's not about feeling less, it's about judging better.
Right, establishing that infallible control over judgment.
Exactly. And, the sources often state that the ultimate goal of this whole philosophical endeavor is assimilation to the divine, becoming like God. And for the Stoics, God is perfect rationality embodied in the cosmos.
Okay.
Now, here's a fascinating point they make. While the Stoic God is obviously one way more powerful, vast, eternal, they suggested that God is not necessarily superior to a perfectly wise human being in terms of virtue or happiness.
Wait, really? A human could be as virtuous or happy as God. That sounds incredibly bold, maybe even arrogant. How did they justify that?
Well, it goes back to the definition. If virtue is a specific state of the soul, perfect rationality, correct judgment, knowledge of good and evil, then that state is the same in quality, whether it exists in the vast mind of the universe or in the perfected mind of a human sage.
So the scale is different, the power is different, but the quality of perfect rationality is the same.
That's the idea. God has it effortlessly and eternally. The sage achieves it through immense effort and maintains it faultlessly. But virtue itself, being a disposition, doesn't admit of degrees in that sense. You're either perfectly rational or you're not quite there yet.
That leaves us with a really provocative question, doesn't it, for you to think about? If you accept this kind of system, a complete logical and physical framework that underpins your ethics, telling you that perfect rationality is the goal and it's theoretically achievable, how does that change your own ambition?
Right. How high do you set the bar for your own potential for wisdom, for virtue, for happiness? If the system itself suggests that assimilation to divine rationality isn't impossible, it's incredibly difficult, what becomes possible when you believe human perfection has this kind of cosmic and logical backing?
Something to definitely mull over.